Okay, so we've got some fun stuff to get into here. We're going to bring the government into the picture. So government intervention is kind of the idea of chapter 4. So chapter 4, I would say enter government. So government intervention in markets. Okay, so that's going to come in multiple forms. The government looks at the current price of fuel oil or something and says, oh my gosh, it's too high. We need to come in and try to protect the consumer. Or we think, oh, prices for farmers are too low. Let's just say that prices need to be at least this amount, right? And so they start monkeying around with the pricing system. And those are examples of price controls, and then we'll get into taxes and subsidies. So we're going to start off with a price ceiling. A price ceiling is a maximum price set by law. A maximum price set by law. You can kind of think of it, the ceiling kind of, you can't go above the ceiling. Can't go above the ceiling. So, we're going to do lots of home bases today, so hopefully you remember that from yesterday. Everybody get home base rocking. So we got a downward sloping demand and upward sloping supply. All markets are currently operating at some price and some quantity, so P1 and Q1, let's call it. So there's home base. And for the price ceiling, let's talk about apartment rent. So 2-bed apartment rent, right? So the 2-bedroom apartment market. Currently, the price is at $800 a month, and the government says, oh my gosh, that's way too high. Those greedy landlords are causing problems for poor tenants, and so we're going to say that rent can't be above $600. All right, so suppose we have a price ceiling. Suppose the government, so for our example here, let's say we set a price ceiling equal to $600. And so we can kind of draw a 600 here somewhere. And I like to just kind of draw a line here. That's the ceiling. Now we kind of did an exercise similar to this yesterday. What do we call that? Look here, what's going on in the market when the price here dictated by law is not at the equilibrium price that would be in a free market. What's going on there? Let's see, let's start passing the attendance sheet around. Shortage. Good. Who said that? Who's the first on the board for the extra credit line today? I didn't see. Jensen? All right. So, let's see. Last name again, Jensen? All right. So, at the ceiling price now, remember how we use these graphs. I know we're all kind of getting used to it. You go over to the demand curve to learn the quantity demanded, right? Law of demand drops south, and the quantity demanded is that amount. Let's just say it's 1,000 units in our big city. But at 600, the supply of housing by landlords is only, looks like What am I at? 450. So how much is that shortage? Who's got their math hat on here? A couple numbers of 1,000, 450, 550. 550? Sound good? All right. So 550 units are now short. In other words, there's more people. One way to think about it is some people who were in one-bedroom apartments or living with their mom and dad, right, when rates were 800, now all of a sudden there's people like, oh, I'll rent one at 600. Yeah, gimme, right? So they enter the market. They are kind of new people who want apartments. And then some of the old people are going to be potentially losing some of their units as well. So we're going to be having a shortage of that. Now, in the face of the shortage yesterday, in a free market, what was the correcting mechanism of the invisible hand when there was a shortage present? What happened to prices? They went up, right? So that was the natural market mechanism. There was incentive by both consumers and producers. Now, this is where we got to start stretching our brains a little bit. It's easy to say, oh, the landlords, yeah, let's stick it to the landlords. They're only going to get 600. We're protecting the consumers. How many of you have heard maybe some of your politicians say, we're going to protect the renters, the poor renters versus the rich landlords, rich versus poor, classic battle, right? And so government's going to come in with their shield and say, I'm going to protect you with this government policy. Well, when they do that, there is some people that get a cheap apartment. There's 450 of them. But there's 550 who don't get that apartment, right? So those consumers aren't too happy. But we don't talk about those consumers too much, right? It's only the ones, these are the ones that are in the news, that the politician will say, oh, we talked to Sally, and Sally is one of these 450, and Sally, tell us about how you like your apartment. Oh, it's so great. I was really struggling with all my bills and everything, and it's just so great that you came in and really gave us this cheap apartment, right? Thank you, Sally. Vote for me, right? But we don't talk about these people. These are the unsung people that can't find the apartment. Maybe they end up moving out of town, right? That could be one result of this, is that they go over to the other town or have to move somewhere else, right? So those are kind of the hidden parts. We talked about primary effects and secondary effects. And so that's what we use our economic tools to do, is to kind of make predictions on what these secondary unintended consequences might be. All right, so that is the result we get in the market. And yet, we still see government doing this. It's just amazing. Peter Jacobson, our other economics professor here, I mean, we almost laughed when the COVID stuff was hitting the fan and gas prices were going up. All of a sudden, politicians are saying, oh, well, let's just cap the price. And it's like, have we not learned anything, lessons from principles of economics? This is what's going to happen, right? This isn't like a mystery, or maybe it'll happen differently. That's what happened in the 1970s, and it'll be different this time. This is what happens. It's very predictable. Okay, so questions or comments there on a price ceiling? Okay, price floor is kind of the opposite direction. A price floor. A price floor is a minimum price set by law. You can't go below the floor. Okay, so this one, let's talk about wages. So on the classic one to discuss is, you can go ahead and do your home base, but here the price is actually going to be the wage, so I'm going to use a W this time, W star. And labor. and maybe we'll do a little time travel here back to 1982 or something. Let's say that the current wage, so this is a little bit fiction here, but the current wages are at $6 an hour. Right? So now what's a little bit different here that's helpful, I hope, to point out is that the supply now is households and real people that want a job. And the businesses are the demand curve. They're the ones that want to buy labor, right? Buy labor hours. And so currently they can buy, let's say, low, no skilled labor at $6 an hour. Go work at the restaurant, go, do whatever. Low, no skill labor. So let's put low, no skill labor. High school students, right? They kind of come in and they're, I'll do whatever, I just want to make some money, man. All right, government comes in and says, oh my gosh, that's way too low. What's the current minimum wage? $7.25. So we're going to set a price floor now at $7.25. I forgot to finish off my home base here. Hopefully you guys did better than me here. L1 and at wage 1. So once the government steps into the market and says we have a new minimum wage, everybody don't thank me now, but I'm saving the worker, the poor, the low, no skill. We're going to do minimum wage. What's the result from yesterday? Javian? Yeah, businesses are going to cut back. So now businesses, remember, are here. So they used to buy this many hours of labor, but now they're going to start looking for alternatives. Or like we used to always have 3 people bussing tables and cleaning off tables and helping customers. We're going to back down to 2, right? So they cut back a little bit. And of course, more people come out. They're like, oh, I'll work for $7.25, right? So the quantity supplied of labor now is here, and the quantity that businesses want to hire is here. And I heard somebody say, this is a what? Surplus. Now we have another word when we're talking about labor markets or the resource market. What do we call a surplus of labor? More people wanting to work than are working. What do we call that? Do you have a job or you don't have a job? You want to work, but you're not working. Unemployment. Yeah, so this is surplus people. In this case, the surplus is unemployed people. There's fewer jobs available than compared to the number of people who want to work. So again, in a free market, this would have corrected itself with a lower wage, which might sound bad at first for workers, but remember, there's more people working when we work back to the equilibrium. All of a sudden, there's more people working at the lower, and they're willing to work, right? This is a voluntary market. Nobody has a gun to your head and says you have to work, right? We got rid of slavery a long time ago. So we have a voluntary system. So there's people who want to work at $6, right? There's people who want to work at $6, and so they're not able to. Okay, so that is the result of a price floor. And now if we bring this back into reality, what is today's market at again? If you guys want a job here in Ottawa, and you go beating the bushes, and it ain't going to take very long, how much are you likely going to get paid? Like $10, right? So $10 is it. So the minimum wage becomes ineffective if the demand curve shifts. So over time, I mentioned this might be 1981 or whatever, but here's this. But over time, if the demand for labor goes up here, now all of a sudden we're at a wage that's higher than the minimum, which is just fine. right? And possibly supply changes too. Maybe supply increases, maybe supply decreases. So there's something happened over time. Whenever we get above the minimum, then that policy basically is ineffective. And in this case is good that it's ineffective, that there's no more unemployed people who want to work that aren't working. So right now it's pretty hard to say for people who say, I want to get a job, but I can't find a job. Really? Because everywhere I go, there's a help wanted sign, right? And you can get into a job. So let's make that note here. I want to shift the demand curve. So let's see. Let's call this D2. Right now, D2 is at like about $10 an hour. And let's call that Q2. So we'll put that note. If the market changes such that the equilibrium price is above the floor, then the government policy doesn't matter. It is ineffective. So the example that I add there is that suppose demand increases to D2. Now we've got the market wage at $10, and life goes on. Same is true, by the way, over here with the ceiling. If the supply of housing would have come down below the ceiling, then the market would have just prevailed. Okay, questions or comments there? All right. So there's your tutor again. Those of you who weren't here when JC was here, you might want to jot that down. So economics tutor's available for help. And he'll be doing our review sessions as well. I think I'll leave that one for now. Okay, now the big enchilada. A tax. So number 3 is a tax. Okay, so how are we going to show a tax? So let's go ahead and do our home base. There's the free market operating all by itself. Let's go ahead and tax the beer market here. So the market for beer is going to be subject to a tax. Currently, beer is selling at $12. Buck a beer. 12 pack of beer, $12, let's say. Government comes along and says, we're going to charge a tax of $2 per unit. You guys got a question? No, I'm looking at you. You don't have to look back, not Jay.
Oh, I thought it was me. I was right.
I just was wondering, guys. Must have a good question. What's up? You guys had a long night or something? Lots to talk about today? Huh?
You was talking to me. You was talking to him.
Yeah. You ready?
Oh,
You got a question?
He talking to you.
You got a question? All right. So, we'll come back to you. I'll come back to you here, so be ready. So, suppose there's a tax of $2 per unit. What is the new price of beer? $14, right? That's what it seems like it's going to be. So I just want to, that's the normal thing to do, right? If you're the liquor store, government said $2, sorry, price is now $14. But let's use our model to analyze what will happen with that. So when we look at the impact, where'd my blue one go? There we go. They were selling 100 beers at a price of 12. Government comes in and says, oh, $2 tax. Oh, no problem. I'll just tack it onto it, right? And so the new price would be potentially $14. Now, when they put 100 units on the shelves at $14, do they sell all of them? No. You start. I see some head shaking. You guys are starting to learn this stuff, right? That's why we're using this. So at $14, consumers don't buy as much. So if they don't buy as much at 14, what's there going to be? Surplus, right? Excess supply. What does the liquor store do when there's a surplus? Cuts its price. So now what ends up happening is that the consumer and the producer share the tax. Depending on some things we'll get into in a little bit. They're going to end up sharing the tax. So the supplier, as you guys suspected, is going to attempt to pass the tax on. So the supply with the tax, this time, I usually don't do it this way, but this is the way this one mechanically works, is it shifts up by the amount of the tax. Right? So this distance here was $2 from 12 to 14. But the consumer's not going to be willing to do that. There's going to be a surplus. And so now the liquor store owner is going to go through that process we did yesterday of trying to adjust its prices to get rid of the surplus. And we're going to end up coming right here to a new price that we're going to call PC, which I'll define in a second. It's the price that the consumer pays. The price that the consumer pays, using my numbers, I kind of split the difference here, so let's call that $13. Now I say that that's the price the consumer pays because what does the producer get? How much money do they net if they sell beer at 13? How much do they get? Jay?
Oh, I was going to answer the question.
Oh, answer the question? Sure, go ahead.
So, because I know how like different, I guess, beer companies have different like prices. I know for a box of, or a pack of 12 for Corona, it's like $14. For a pack of, and then for a pack of 12 for.
Well, here, remember, this is just economic model, so I don't. You can put any beer, any label.
I'm asking like, how come each company, like, based on like the pack, right? They all companies can have the all same 12 pack, but all cost different ones. So how is it?
Well, they're different products, so we'll get into market structures later. Corona tastes different than Bud Light, right? And so they'll come up with different schemes of you packaging Bud Light. But here, I want you to try to abstract yourself. I know it's not always easy, but to kind of let yourself loose a little bit, shake off a little bit of maybe some fun things that you're thinking about, and try to kind of absorb the model. Because the lesson that we're trying to learn is that you can't just tax the evil beer company. When the government taxes the corporation, you pay for it too. The goods that you buy from that corporation, you pay the tax too. So there's no such thing as just having the big bad company pay the tax. It ends up being shared, is what the economics here that we're learning on the tax burden is what we call it. Okay, so at a price of 13 then, I said that this is the price the consumer pays because the producer doesn't actually get 13. How much do they get? 11, right? Minus the tax. So, first of all, at 13, the consumer's going to pay this amount for this quantity. So QT becomes the quantity after the tax. And let's just say that that ends up being 80. So consumers are buying less beer at a higher price. And producers now are netting the price after the tax, which is PP, the price the producers get, which is 11. Okay, let's do some, make sure we got some of these definitions down here. So, so little t equals the per unit tax. And QT is the quantity after the tax is imposed. PC is the price consumers pay after the tax. PP is the price producers receive after the tax. So we got all these pieces to kind of keep in track of. And then we can kind of put a few things together with an equation. PP equals the price consumers pay minus the tax. So this is an important formula here. The price that the producer gets is the consumer price minus the tax. So from our example, we had 11, 13 minus 2 equals 11. So that's an important formula there. Now, how much did the consumer's price go up by compared to before the tax? How much did the consumer's price go up by? $1, right? So they went from 12 to 13, and the producer went from 12 to 11, the difference going to the government. So another thing that we can calculate is the tax revenue. So tax revenue, TR, is equal to the quantity of the tax times the tax itself. So here's another important formula. Tax revenue, how much is the government collecting? The per unit tax, which is the $2, times our quantity after the tax. How much is that? Quantity after tax, what was QT? 80. So the government collected 160 bucks. Okay, question?
So in this, when we're at 12 and we added on the 2 for tax to go to 14,
Yeah.
and we're saying that the liquor store didn't sell any beer, so they dropped it down to 13?
It's not that they didn't sell any beer, they sold this much beer. So I didn't want to monkey this up. So good question. At 14, remember the first day the tax goes, the liquor store says, okay, it was 12, I'm going to do 14, right? And so that, they attempted to do that, but when they did it, they ended up having this much sold, the quantity demanded. They had this much sold, and they had this much left on the shelves. They started with 100, and they had that surplus. And then the surplus forced them to drop price. And so ultimately, they'd figure out that 13 is the new equilibrium. That make sense? Okay, any other things, clarifying questions? All right, so tax revenue to the government, we can show graphically. Here's our 80 units. So this is basically base times height. So the height here is the $2 tax. So we can think about this little guy being the height of the $2 tax. And then we had the base of the QT. And so this area is government revenue. That is the tax revenue graphically. Yeah?
How many beers does it take to push you over that limit?
What do you mean? Over what limit?
Over the limit of too much.
How many beers?
Yeah.
Well, that's for you to find out. Everybody's a little different.
I know. I'm a lightweight.
You gotta push, see, test yourself, get yourself a little breathalyzer. All right, anybody else? Okay, so the tax revenue is $160. How much is the consumer's burden of the tax? How much did they effectively pay? Of this $160 of tax revenue that the government collected, what did the consumer pay? Yeah, Jensen?
80 of it.
80 of it, right? So they paid $1 of it. If we go back and say, oh, they used to pay 12, now they're paying 13, so they're paying $1 of that on the 80 units that they're buying. The producer used to get 12, but now they're getting 11, so they're paying $1 of it. And so if we break this down, the shares of each one, we could kind of break down a little bit more and say that the consumer's share is this upper half, the $1 that they did. That's the consumer's share. And the producer had the bottom half. Okay, so that is our last little things to add on to this. So we got the total tax revenue is the total tax collected, and then we can calculate the consumer burden and the producer burden. The consumer burden of the tax is equal to the price that the consumer pays minus what they used to pay times QT. So the consumer is now paying 13. They used to pay 12. And they're buying 80 units. So that gives us $80 of the consumer's burden of the tax. The producer's paying for it too. The producer burden of the tax is generally PP minus, P star, the opposite, the market price of 12 minus the price they're paying now times the 80 ends up giving $80 for the producer too. So they're splitting this tax equally. Okay. There's a lot there to digest, so it might take a little bit. Make sure you got all your notes down when you get through your homework and other stuff. Hopefully you'll have it nailed down. Any questions so far? We got a few more layers to pull on still. What was consumer surplus? That was from Tuesday, I think. If you want to look back in your notes, consumer surplus. Let me go here.
Like
Give me your name. Tyler, yeah.
Like measuring a deal, like if you got a deal or not.
All right, measuring if you got a deal or not. So more specifically, it was the difference between what the consumer pays and what they versus what they actually paid for each unit that they consume. So is somebody still getting a deal on beer with this tax now that the price has gone up to 13? Is somebody still getting some consumer surplus? Yeah, right? Remember the alcoholic down here? The alcoholic was willing to pay $18, no problem, right? So 18 minus 13 is $5 of consumer surplus. They still have $5 of consumer surplus on that unit. So we still have that consumer surplus going down. Then we also have the producer surplus, which was the profit difference incrementally for each unit. The difference between the price and the minimum price they must pay. The supply curve shows the opportunity cost of each additional unit, and so we still have that going on too. So in a free market, we had the two triangles. So let's kind of write a separate one here, a separate little reminder. I'm going to put recall. Consumer surplus and producer surplus. Do another home base. No tax at this point. So at home base, we had consumer surplus of this upper triangle area. And we had producer surplus of this lower triangle area. So that's back in your notes. That's why I did it kind of quick, right? But that was the two triangle areas to say, hey, there's win-win situations going on with the trading of beer. The company profits, but so does the consumer, right? There's kind of this win-win situation. And if we look at the dollar value of adding up all of this triangular regions, these two regions, that would kind of show the benefit of the market, like the free market of beer. Like, why do people want to do trade? Well, that's one way to measure that. So now look back to this picture for a sec. What is missing from, we started here, and if we kind of use the same numbers, this was the $12 and the 100. Here's where we started. Here's where we ended. What happened to the overall society's welfare? Did it go up or down? It went down, right? What area do you look at here that makes, there's what we started with. Look at this now. What piece is missing out of that triangle? Anybody want to come to the board for extra credit and show me with the marker? What piece is missing? Who wants extra credit? Come on, come on.
Even if we mess up?
Yeah, even if you mess up. Oh, I saw Jay stand first. Or you just take it off your jacket? You're coming, okay. Jay, I need you to take out your earbuds though. Earbuds too, gotta be out. All right, and I should have said you needed to have your mask on. Pull the mask up.
Because I know you're going to mess up.
I don't mask because I keep my distance. Come on, I ain't got all day. We got more to cover today. I thought you had this.
I did, I got a brain
Now, here's where we started.
Yeah.
And now what's missing over there?
Hey, watch out.
You got 3 seconds.
Yes.
3, 2,
Just draw it.
1. All right, wrong. Thank you for playing our game here today.
Let me try next.
Okay, nope. You got to get it right now to have it. You got it? You got the answer?
I don't even have
Who's got the answer? So if this is 100, I'll give you a little hint. What's the quantity over there? 80. What piece is missing? Do you see it now? What piece is missing? Here we are at 80. What piece of the puzzle is missing?
Oh, the top.
Nope, not the top.
The bottom.
Nope, not the bottom.
Middle.
Middle, nope, not the middle. The middle actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to bring that up. The middle now the government has, right? So it's a piece that's been claimed, but it's not missing. But there is an absolute missing piece of the puzzle. Caleb?
20 between quantity of tax and quantity of equilibrium.
Over here, in between here.
Yeah.
And so we used to have this, right? I want you guys, when I'm doing that, I want you to be thinking this. We used to have all the way to here, and now we only have 80 being exchanged. So the piece we're missing is right there. This area vanished. And we call it dead weight loss. It poof vanished, right? It used to be somebody's benefit, now it's nobody's. Now, if we do consumer surplus, and I'm gonna do it over here, so this upper chunk is the new consumer surplus, right? Difference between what a consumer is willing to pay and what they actually pay. Willing, actual, willing, actual, willing, actual, willing, actual, all the way out to 80 units. Producer profit on these units is the difference between the price that they get, PP, and the minimum. Actual, minimum, actual, minimum, actual, minimum, actual, minimum. So they have this triangle. Government has this piece. This one just disappeared on us. It vanished. So that's an important part of this tax explanation here. And so on top of this graph, rather than mucking up that one, let's see, this is free market. Let's do another one. I think we can crank this up pretty nicely. That'll be the best thing for your notes. We got lots of these floating around now. So there's home base again. Once we impose the tax, if you guys want to just do this type of thing, that's fine. We end up getting a picture like this, if you want to do the supply with the tax. Your book has some nice pictures too. But this now is the consumer surplus area. Consumer surplus is this red area. Producer surplus, I guess I'll do in red down here too, is this area. And the government got their money, so they can do all good things, new roads, bridges, help people out, educate people, all that stuff. They're all doing good stuff with their money, right? So that is the tax revenue. And then we're missing the chunk here of dead weight loss. Okay, so dead weight loss is our kind of last piece that we haven't talked about here. DWL is a loss to society because the marginal benefit does not equal the marginal cost of the last unit consumed / sold. It's basically a waste. Let's just put wasted resources. Dead weight loss. Okay, questions on that? All right, so let's ask a question here. Does the tax burden, or let's really be an is the tax burden always equally shared? This sounds like a good test question to me, so you might want to double star that. Is the tax burden always equally shared by buyers and sellers, consumers and producers? And I want to give you the answer before we kind of show why. The answer is no. In fact, it probably is likely not shared perfectly even Steven like we did here. So, golf club time. I think I'll come back here for a sec. Which one was more elastic? A flatter demand curve or a steeper demand curve? More elastic. Flatter, right? So when the consumers have a bigger response, we say that they're more elastic. So if I start to make this demand curve here more elastic, what happens to our variables and what happens most importantly to the amount consumers are paying of the $2 tax? Does everybody start to visualize that? So you kind of want to watch remember the red box here is the $80. That's the consumer's burden of the tax, right? And so as the demand curve becomes more elastic or flatter, what's happening to the red box? It's getting smaller, right? So is the $2 tax changing? No, it's not. So what's happening to QT? Is it drifting to the left or to the right? Now you got to keep your eyes on a couple things. What's happening to QT? It's going to the left, right? So left, I should say correct, instead of left, right, and make it confusing like a little comedy routine here or something. So the golf club intersecting the blue supply curve is where QT ends up being, and as it becomes more elastic, we're actually buying less. And so QT is going to be over here, and so what that means is that the producer is going to start to pay more of the $2, right? The $2 is set by government. So now the consumer is going to shrink. Maybe it's 50 cents. It could be anything. I'm just going to give you an example. The consumer might be paying 50 cents, and the producer, using this formula, if this ended up going up to $12.50 minus the tax of $2 gives us the producer eating more of the tax. They're paying $1.50 of the tax instead of $1. In fact, if it was perfectly elastic, look at what happens. Who's paying the tax now? The producer's paying all of it. Now, this is an extreme case. That's not likely to happen, though, right? So that is how the burden of taxes can change. Now, the same is true, a little bit harder with the way this is pictured, but as the supply becomes more elastic, what's happening to the bottom half, the green box here, if the supply becomes more elastic, it's getting smaller. And QT is getting smaller, and so now the burden is shifting back to the consumers. So think of it this way, maybe this isn't the best way to think about it. If the consumer, let's just walk through this thought experiment. Let me just phrase it that way. Suppose the demand for the good is more inelastic. Consumers really, really like it. Look at what's happening. What's happening to QT as the demand curve becomes steeper? What's happening to QT? It's getting bigger. And what's happening to the fraction of the tax that the consumer's paying? It's getting bigger. The red box is getting bigger as this shifts up. And so if consumers are willing to pay anything for gasoline, guess what the government likes to tax? Gasoline. If consumers are willing to pay anything for booze because it's one of the free, easily available legal drugs, guess what the government likes to tax? Booze. If people are hooked on cigarettes, guess what the government likes to tax? Cigarettes, right? So the more inelastic the good is, the easier it is to pass the tax off to one party or the other. Okay, so let's write that out. I'll do a couple of graphical examples too, now that we've visualized it here. All right. So this is kind of flowing from here. Is the burden of is the taxation equally shared? No, and here's why. The relative burden of tax is determined by the relative elasticities of demand and supply. How steep is one compared to the other? So let's do, we'll start with 3 graphs. Just kind of doing some quickie ones here. We'll start one by one. It's not home base, so don't draw home base the traditional way yet. But draw a real flat demand curve and a fairly steep supply curve. And then do your home base business. And if you want, I guess we could put in the $12 if we want. Maybe that'd be a good way to bring this one home. If the supply looked like that, and demand looked like that, the supply with the tax would intersect here. Whoops, I drifted away here. So that's QT, this was Q star. And if we had a $2 tax, I did too big of a tax here with this steep curve. All right, I guess we have this big of a tax. All right, this is a lousy example, but I'm gonna roll. You guys do whatever. You need to have, this has to be your tax. So that ends up being your tax. And consumers end up paying $12, and you guys make up whatever numbers you want, $12.20, and producers are down here. And so we've got consumers paying very little of the tax, the red box. And producers are paying a lot. I should have probably just drawn a regular supply curve, but I was trying to push the envelope. Or if we do a steep demand curve, and let's just do a little more regular supply curve. And then we have our tax, is this vertical height. There's our revenue. Now the red box is big. This is PC, this is PP. And then it might be a little confusing of why I say the relative burden of tax. So this last panel, I just kind of want to show what that means. Draw them both equally steep. Like do a kind of a steep X. Supply and demand. And then impose a little tax here. If they're both steep, they can both end up sharing the tax again. Just like we did before. So if their relative elasticities are about the same, the relative steepness of the supply and demand curve, then the red area again and the green area will be about the same. Okay, and just to be clear, so we got the green burden, the way we've been doing it here, that's producer burden. And the red is the consumer's burden. Questions? Does the government always take money, or do they sometimes give money?
They don't really give money.
They don't give too much, maybe, but
When they do, it be chump change.
all right. How many of you are getting some chump change to come to Ottawa University from the government? So Jay, you're on that sweet military deal, right?
Yeah, he getting that chump
I
change.
get it.
Now, all of you are a little bit touched by that. You might not know it, but there's federal money that comes out in various forms, right? One of them, by the way, was COVID money. So when COVID money flowed from the system, that was eligible, like Ottawa University being a private university. You know, of course, KU and K-State, the state universities, they got the spigot on in different ways, but even the private universities got some of that. So what I want to look at next is the government policy number 4 of a subsidy. It's basically the opposite of a tax. The government's giving money rather than taking money. And we might at first think, oh, that's good, that's good. But as with many things, it might be bad too. So subsidy is government, let's just say giving money instead of taking money. All right, so now go back to your home base again. And let's measure education. So here's the market for college. And currently there are this many students being educated, and the price of tuition is $28,000 for credit for a year. So annual education rates. The government says, oh my gosh, only 1,000 people getting educated at 28,000? Let's give the kids some money, right? Let's give the kids some money so that they can go to school. When you guys get money, like Jay and some of you other ones for sure on some federal money of some sort, does Ottawa University benefit, or is it all to your benefit?
Both.
It's a both. So it's gonna, basically, long story short, this is gonna happen again, because a subsidy is kind of the opposite of a tax. And so Ottawa University is gonna benefit and you're gonna benefit. There's gonna be sharing, not of the burden, but the benefit in this case, right? All right, so here's how that one works. When you get the subsidy of, $5,000, that increases your demand. So the demand with the subsidy, so you get $5,000, and so you end up going, more people end up going to school, which is what we intended. But it doesn't go up by $5,000 for Ottawa. Ottawa might try to charge $5,000, but they find that they're not filling all their seats. And so same story we told over there, the new price that consumers pay, the price that, in this case, the price that producers receive, PP, I guess I can still use my red. The price that producers receive goes up by some amount. And I guess since I drew it equal again, we'll do it equal. I said 5,000, now I'm regretting that. Let's say it's 6,000 again, it's just to keep numbers easy. Change your 5 to a 6 if you guys wrote that. So we have a $6,000 subsidy, so that now Ottawa's getting 31 grand. Because more people are coming, right? They're just responding. They're like, oh my gosh, everybody wants our education now that the government's giving them 6 grand. And so tuition prices go up, but they don't go up by the full 6 grand. They just go up. And they go up to where the supply curve for Ottawa University education and the demand with the subsidy intersect. And so the quantity after the subsidy, QS, the quantity after the the quantity after the subsidy is higher. So now we have more people getting education, which was the intended result. And then what are those college students paying? They're not paying $31,000, they're paying 25, right? Because they have $6,000 off of the $31,000 price tag Otto was charging. They got $6,000, and so they are paying, the price the consumers pay is $25,000 using these numbers. Okay, so now the government is spending this amount, right? This many people, the quantity after subsidy, let's just say it's 1,200. 1,200 people now are getting educated and they're all getting $6,000 a pop. So that area is government spending. That's how much the government's spending on the program. All right, questions or comments on subsidy? All right, so that is our four main pieces of the price controls. So we got a couple more things to look at in this chapter. And let's look at the tax rates next here. So let me use the black marker if I got any ink left here. All right. So marginal versus average tax rate. So my buddy Mike Smith that I worked at the restaurant when I was your guys' age, or even younger than some of you, he told me once, dude, I can't take on this extra shift of overtime because it's going to bump me into a higher tax bracket, right? He said, I've seen it happen before. And I'm like, Mike, that can't be right, right? And so have you guys heard that, of being bumped into a higher tax bracket and that might hurt you, right? So if you go from a 10% tax bracket to a 20% tax bracket or something, right? So that's the distinction we're going to try to make a little more clear. Jay?
There was a, what was that? They were talking about, the government said something about like, or they were trying to pass a bill or something where like, if you had over like $600 in your bank account or something like that, that you were going to be taxed or something like that.
Yeah, they were gonna track it.
Yeah, track it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the type of thing we got to be careful of, because they want to try to grab on. The argument against that is the $600 thing. Come on, you're picking on the poor people more or less, relatively poor, right? If we're talking about the $600 factor compared to 10,000. So, all right, so marginal versus income tax. So here's how the world works with this. So the income, here's your income, and you have ranges. So let's just say from $0 to $10,000, your marginal tax rate is 0%. You are poor, and so we deem that you are not going to have to pay any tax. From 10,000 to 30,000, you're going to pay 10%, and we're just going to keep this nice and simple. From 30,000, well, we'll do one layer here. So 30,000 to 100,000, you pay 20%, and 100,000 on up to whatever you make is 30%. So the old saying of the more you make, the more they take, right? That's because this is the way our system in the United States works. So it's called a progressive tax. The rich pay proportionately more than the poor. But here's the thing most people don't understand. If you make $33,000, you might be kicking yourself because you bumped into the next tax bracket, right? Same thing my buddy Mike Smith was talking about. But that's not what really happens. You only pay the 20% on the incremental marginal amount in that bracket. So you pay 20% on the extra $3,000, right? So that is how the marginal income tax works. So let's do a little quick example. If your income equals $33,000, then your tax is equal to your first 10,000 times 0% plus your next 20,000 at 10% plus your last 3,000 at 20%. That's the equation to calculate your tax. And so we get $0 on the first 10,000. 10% of 20,000 is $2,000, and then 20% of 3,000 is what? Our 300, 600 bucks. So my total tax that I owe the IRS is $2,600. This is the way the United States system works. So your incremental money gets bumped up. So what is my average tax? My average tax rate is equal to the $2,600 divided by my $33,000 worth of income. And I won't attempt to do that one by 26, 33,000. 0.078. So 0.078, and it's 78 repeating, which means you got a 7.87% tax rate. Far from bumping into the 20% rate, right? Because you had all that previous income. So now, as you start to earn more money, your extra money you earn is going to be in these higher brackets, but you're not going to be hurt from the previous stuff. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, so an economist by the name of Art Laffer worked with in the 80s when the highest marginal tax rate in the United States at the time got into the, what do you think is the highest rate in America we've ever paid? Like, I have it at 30 here. What do you think is the highest it's ever been? 50? Do you think we ever got up to 50? No way. Government taking half your money? It was 70. 70! So 70 was it. So the Laffer curve, named after Art Laffer, said that you're not always going to raise tax money, tax revenue, like we've been showing here, by jacking up the tax rate, right? And if we kind of think about that, if the tax rate's 100%, are you going to work? No, right? And so that was kind of the logic of it, is that the amount of tax revenue that you get, if we measure tax revenue here and the tax rate here, if we think of taxing everybody 100%, not too many people are going to work, right? So tax revenue will go up as we start to charge a higher tax rate, 10%, 20%, 30%, maybe up to 40% or whatever. But at some point here, people say, screw that, I'm not working anymore. And so this is people, when we hit this part here, we're kind of saying, screw you, I'm not working if you take that much. And so the common thing in Washington, D.C. at the time was, We need more tax money? Just raise the tax, right? Raise the tax on the rich. Well, even the rich would have kind of their limits at some point to where, screw that, I'm not going to work anymore. And so what is the optimal tax rate is kind of what's called into question here with the Laffer curve in terms of how much revenue can you collect. All right, so last thing here. So an increase in taxes, in tax rates, causes a disincentive to work. And if people don't work, there is no income to tax. That's the idea of the Laffer curve that the chapter brings up. That we need to think about the tax base and how many people, what they're going to tolerate. What else happens if the government goes up to 70, 80%? Do you think people might be doing cash deals a little bit more? A little more working under the table, right? So they're going to start dodging it. So that's another element of this too, that the government just can't go taxing any old rate. All right, we'll call it a day there. So that's chapters 4 and 5 in the books. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.